We did a lot of those flight sequences with the wide angle shots and getting all these actors on wires and locking into each other and flying around in circles. The camera team did some really neat techniques where they would lock the camera focus in onto like a fist as the entire environment is whipping around. It was just so cool to watch that kind of thing in the monitors. You're like, wow, that actually looks really good. When you put those actors into that environment where they see the LED wall, they see the explosion, and all the actors can act authentically, you can't get a better performance out of an actor than putting them in the real scenario.
And what would you say the biggest misconception is?
People think that this is just a big green screen. No, it is not. When they see it in camera, it's that aha moment where they go, oh, I get it now.
What advice would you give to someone starting out?
I wouldn't suggest faking it until you make it in an environment like this. Ultimately, what I would say is,
want to know how they pulled off the virtual production of Superman? Well, today you'll find out, because I'm talking to Wes Goins, a virtual production supervisor and the on-set operator for Superman. He's been working in the field since the very beginning, and honestly, this conversation is a masterclass for anyone looking to start a career in virtual production. You'll know exactly how to prep for a perfect shoot day, what it takes to be successful on set, and how to break into the industry for the first time. Hit subscribe down below, and let's get started.
Hey guys, I'm Wes Goins. I'm a virtual production supervisor, engine operator, and technical project manager. I work for Lux Machina/NEP Sweetwater Film and Entertainment. And thanks for having me.
Let's focus in on Superman then, which is obviously a really great use of virtual production. Could you walk us through some of the different scenarios on that show in particular and the different ways they use virtual production on that show?
We built two main setups for them. One was the Clark's apartment scene, which is like these crazy neon colors with a giant jelly monster floating around in the background. And that was really, really cool. And then the other one is we used the Lux Stage, which is a 30-foot by 80 by 90-foot wide LED volume, where that's where we did a lot of those flight sequences with the wide angle shots and getting all these actors on wires and locking into each other and flying around in circles and getting drones out. And that was really, really cool to watch.
Yeah.
Because these were very dynamic, very high pace, and the camera team did some really neat techniques where they would lock the camera focus in onto like a fist as the entire environment is whipping around. And it was just so cool to watch that kind of thing in the monitors. You're like, wow, that actually looks really good. So those were the main types of setups that we were doing. Is mainly the flying fight sequences and then that apartment scene.
With stunts on the virtual production stage, how do you approach that for things like wire work, where people are probably, I'm guessing, suspended from the ceiling, but there's also ceiling panels that are part of a virtual production stage. So how did they approach that on this show?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked, because that's one of the things that makes our stage, the Lux Stage at Trillith, so unique. It's a custom built volume where, we have this support structure that kind of distributes the weight of the LED panels perfectly. And the ceiling is 9 individual pods. You could either separate them or connect them into one contiguous ceiling. And you have the ability to pop tiles out up to like 2 meters on each side. So you can create giant gaps in the wall where you can run that stunt rigging straight through to a winch farm on the other side of the volume. It can be done in seconds. So it's really, really modular in that sense. So all that we got to do is kind of block out with the production stunt team, like, hey, what are you guys going to do? How are you guys going to set this up? And then our LED guys can go up and just pop these tiles out, throw on their harnesses, and they can run that stunt rigging through. And it's a pretty quick process. So that's a really cool.
Was there a lot of being suspended in air and some of that, like?
Definitely. That was happening constantly. And these guys were flying. You could see like in the BTS, they had the guys in the chroma suits kind of like manning these different mounts that they could kind of like put people on. And there was a lot of wires. So that's why we built that stage, was for that type of use case.
And from your perspective, why were the flying scenes chosen to be shot in the volume versus going on a green screen?
I'll be honest with you, I'm biased because, I came from a theater background. I love live performances. I love it when the actors are immersed in the environments. And I really think that is the bread and butter of the volume work. When you're working in a chroma key green screen situation for months on end, they call it green screen fatigue for a reason. I mean, this is a thing that happens. So when you put those actors into that environment where they see the LED wall, they see the environment, they see the explosion, and all the actors can act authentically with the world that they're in. I mean, that you can't get a better performance out of an actor than putting them in the real scenario. And I think that is why we did that. And aside from just the acting in general, being able to get those real-time reflections. When a cloud is whipping by, you have a suit or some kind of object that is shiny or reflective. Being able to get those reflections in camera in real time, I mean, that is the best option. You could just get the real thing on the day. I mean, you're never going to get a better reflection than the real thing.
And even in like characters' eyes with so many of those close-up shots, like it's easy to overlook, but it's one of them.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we did that in a Black Adam. The guy was flying into the clouds and there's lightning going off and he's bald and there's lightning. You could see the lightning shimmering off of his head, So particularly for superhero flight sequences, I think that is the best way to use this technology for sure.
I guess on those flying scenes too, was that storyboarded, or how much creativity and experimentation were they trying to do on the day versus on the prep days and leading up to it?
Ultimately, that's kind of what we're selling, is they have the ability to create a sandbox, when the creatives come in. So you do as much work as you possibly can on the front end to just kind of like load the media, get all the looks set, and then just streamline the process once they get in. And we'll make changes on the day. So having the ability to make color corrections or kind of like load in different unique assets or grab a piece from here and place it there for a different camera shot. Those are some of the things that we do when we're leading up to that, is just trying to envision kind of what the pipeline's going to look like and kind of what their goal is on the day, because every production's different. Every production has different needs. So just trying to work out in pre-production and having those conversations so that we have the clairvoyance, like going into the production, like what are we going to need to do? Like, where should we focus our efforts? Because it's different every time. And even from the day to day with the same production. So just making sure communication is seamless, with the production is key.
Yeah. And I'm guessing a lot of people don't realize that a lot of that prep work, it's all done before the shoot day. Most of the actual hard work is done before you show up and before, it's expensive and all the cameras are running and the actors are there. And I guess talking about set builds, talking about Clark's apartment, that seemed like a pretty big set piece that you guys were dealing with. How did that set and collaboration come together for Clark's apartment?
Yeah, that's great. And we'll touch on the tech viz aspect of that, because that's where a lot of the technical project managers and the virtual production producers and supervisors kind of get together and they decide, okay, how are we going to do this, right? A lot of times you'll build out the scene in either Unreal or Vectorworks or whatever software you're using to really dial in the size of the stage, the size of the space, and the size of the LED wall, and make sure that there's enough room for the technicians to work around it. In this case, we like to just give them the opportunity to take the room and build the scene. And then we'll come in. A lot of our guys are concert touring specialists, so they'll come in and we can just knock that wall out really, really quick and just pop it up around the scene. Because sometimes the production team doesn't know what's needed to make it successful, so maybe they won't build it the right way. So it's important for us to kind of come in after them and build the wall around them for those types of scenes. Obviously, with like the Stage 22, that's a permanent installations, but it's full 360 degrees. So you could come in and just build a wall, or you could build whatever set piece in there, and you'll have full coverage all the way around. So it really just depends on the setup, but that's usually how we do it. Yeah,
for sure. Hey, real quick, we don't take any outside sponsors, but if you want to support the channel and start your own career in Unreal 5, then you should check out my course, Unreal Fundamentals. I'll take you from a complete beginner to mastering filmmaking in Unreal 5. This is the same core skill set you need to know if you want to start operating on set. Plus, as a free bonus, you'll get every template, every cheat sheet, and every preset I use to make my own animated films faster than ever in Unreal 5. It's on sale right now at unrealforvfx.com/fundamentals. I'll leave a link down below. Let's get back to the interview. And so what are some of the projects that you've worked on so far?
Back in 2020, I got a job with Lux Machina, who, these guys were amazing. They kind of pioneered the virtual production workflow on The Mandalorian. So it was a real blessing to kind of get to work with these guys, because I felt like I got to learn under some of the greatest minds in the industry when it came to the virtual production workflow. So when I started working with them, I got on the Dwayne Johnson and Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds movie called Red Notice, which that was really cool. It was a lot of action sequences, using LED walls, car chase fight scenes, people flying around, explosions. Like, it was really, really fun to kind of break into that world and do a really exciting job like that. And then after that, I mean, we started hitting it hard. We did Shazam 2 and Black Adam back to back. We filmed those at the same time. So it was a lot of superhero flights, flying guys up into the air and throwing them across the volume, which was really, really cool. And then one of my favorite jobs that we've ever done was Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis.
Yeah.
Which that was shot in our LED volume at the Lux Stage at Trillith in Georgia. And that was absolutely incredible, man, because it was a very abstract sci-fi type film, which is kind of the bread and butter for working in a virtual production environment. Adam Driver is standing on top of a building and he's stopping time and there's all this weird stuff happening. And it was just so cool to do that and build the tools to be able to interact with that environment, like freezing the clouds and stopping time and changing colors and doing all this like weird stuff with the Unreal environment was super cool. This is probably the most recognition I'm ever going to get for the work that I've done in my entire life. But I went ahead and bought the Steelbook for Megalopolis, and it's got all the volume work.
Oh, yeah.
That we did. So it's like Adam Driver, and even on the inside, on the back, it's got the scene that we shot of them on the girders. That was all in the volume.
Wow. So are those... Like, again, you never really know because there's always a little bit of...
Final pixel, baby.
Final pixel?
Final pixel.
That's the dream.
Oh, dude.
Honestly, for such a huge outdoor environment, too, that's like...
Honestly, we could do an entire episode about Megalopolis in itself, dude. I wish we knew each other back then.
Yeah.
Because, holy Moses, dude. Like, there was so much cool information about that because we basically completely rebuilt the entire New York City skyline and had different sections of the city and sublevels so that you could like change LODs and like do all this crazy stuff because Francis Ford Coppola, he's a shoot from the hip kind of guy. We didn't even know what he wanted. So like we were just like, oh crap, he just wants us on this building. Like, where do we go? So that was really, really cool. So that was one of my favorite jobs. And then from that, I've done a lot of car process stuff, worked with Eddie Murphy on the pickup, did It Chapter 3, the Welcome to Derry series, which was really cool. So if you're into horror, that was a really fun environment, really freaky, a lot of weird stuff happening in there. And we shot Rolling Loud, which is an Owen Wilson movie about taking his son to a Travis Scott concert. So that was pretty cool to kind of put this concert environments up on the wall and get 300 extras in there raging it. That was fun. And then we did Peacemaker season 2, a lot of car process work, and then Superman. So those are probably some of the most exciting jobs that I've done in the last 5 years.
Very exciting. And so let's say you're working with a first-time director who's never used virtual production before. How would you explain both the benefits and the limitations of working in virtual production?
So when a director comes in who's never worked with this before, there's usually kind of a sense of fear because, there's a lot of money being spent, there's a lot of moving parts, and it's kind of on them to make sure that it succeeds. The unknown is always scary, especially when there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. There's a little bit of a fear that goes into that. So one of the things that we do is just try to make them feel as comfortable as possible and instill as much confidence in them that we know what we're doing. Also just sell them on the fact that they're going to have that creative freedom on the day. And, sometimes they come in with a little bit of high stress, but I tell you, when they see it in camera, it's that aha moment where they go, oh, I get it now. Like, this is really, really cool. And it gives them the opportunity to make changes, as particularly with the real-time stuff. Like when you can show a director, hey, you don't like where that trash can is or that tree? Well, let me just move it out of the way. Or, oh, hey, we built some different materials for that building. So if you want to like weather it, or if you want to change the way those windows look or add some broken glass, we have these opportunities to make changes on the fly. Mm-hmm. And just making sure that they understand that all of that work that you're going to do in post-production needs to be done in pre-production to make sure that we have a successful shoot. Because the more that you plan ahead, the more successful it's going to be. So just making sure that those channels are wide open and that clear communication is defined and the expectation is defined. And much like with The Mandalorian, that was the best ever because there was a clear plan. All departments knew exactly what they were doing when they went into it. It was cohesive across the board. So if we can emulate that as much as possible and get, making sure that the production departments are all on board and everybody knows what we're doing, it tends to go really, really well.
For sure. And even with like The Mandalorian, you have Jon Favreau, who's done some gigantic visual effects movies. So I think the director having some of that visual effects experience and being able to connect the dots on how the process needs to work together, it can make a pretty big difference for the final result.
Definitely. And it always starts from the top down, like the cadence is set from the top. So if they come in comfortable, it's going to be a good shoot, man. And we've experienced that. I've done really, really small shoots with a lot lower budgets where everybody was very frantic and freaking out because they didn't plan ahead and they weren't ready for it, and they were losing it. Whereas I've had high-end productions, kind of like, you mentioned Favreau, who just knows what he's doing and kind of has that clear vision and comes in really relaxed and confident. And then that transcends down to every single department, all the way down to the operator. And that's a really good feeling.
Well, yeah, let's move on to some of the car processing stuff. And what is car processing, and what does a virtual production shoot look like when you're trying to shoot characters in a vehicle versus on a 360-degree stage?
One of the things that we do is we'll hire a company to go out and shoot a set of arrays. So there's this company that we use called Ascend Aerials. And this guy, Louis, is super cool. He's got this crazy sports car with this awesome camera array mounted to the top, and it's modular. It's got a gimbal, so if you're going up hills, it can move and, gyroscope level itself out. It's super high tech and really, really cool. And these guys, we've been working with them for a while, and they kind of understand the workflow. They understand the process, and we'll get them out there, and they'll shoot, 8 cameras around and maybe 2 or 3 cameras up on top. That gives an entire array full perspective, which is equivalent to a lat long or like an HDRI. Then we can do what I like to call a Frankenstitch, which is kind of like you take these different camera arrays and you kind of stitch them together and soft edge them and blend them and just like do your best. Or you could source it out to a VFX house where a bunch of really talented people will stitch it together and compensate the lens distortions and all these things to kind of like line all the elements up into a perfect lat long. And honestly, that's the way to go. It costs a little bit more money, but that's the move, because then you can just apply an equirectangular effect or a spherical mapping to wrap that environment seamlessly around the wall. And then every camera angle is going to be accurate.
Yeah.
For car processing in particular, I mean, you're not going to get anything better than principal photography. So getting that array shot and put on the wall, I mean, there's nothing better than the real thing, right? So being able to put that up, and then you get honest reflections. Every little detail is accounted for. The rear view mirrors have the rear view perspective. You've got all these reflections, lights. And then when you combine that with the light cards to deal, like say you have a night shot and you're dealing with overhead lamps, going over when you're driving, you can undulate the light cards. Or, we did a shoot one time where they were traveling very quickly through trees. So we actually created a tool called the undulator, which is just a shader that you apply to a light card, and then it kind of randomizes and flickers the light card. So it really creates that sense of like the sun traveling through trees sporadically and randomly. As far as car processing goes, that's probably the best way to go, the best approach. It puts the actors in the real world, it puts them in the environment. And then when you apply the color pipeline to match the principal photography with the volume work, I mean, it's just an extension of that day, and it looks exactly the same. So that's the best way to do it.
And in terms of building the array of panels around the cars, is it a slightly different variation depending on where the camera is? Or have you found that there's kind of a recipe that works for a majority of shots?
So usually what we'll do is we'll build like a curved wall and a ceiling, and then sometimes we'll have like 2 giant rolling walls on bases and maybe some wild walls on small bases. So we have the main hero shot and the ceiling, and then we can actually wheel some of these other walls into position to kind of accommodate some specific shots, because maybe they've got like a weird French over from the back and you're kind of seeing a weird edge or something and you need to accommodate for that. And so we'll just roll one of these rolling walls into place. Mm-hmm. We try to keep it as modular as possible, but while still maintaining the integrity of like the main hero wall, which is usually curved, just so you're kind of shooting into the curve, and that just tends to make things look more realistic and more 3D.
So as an operator on those scenes, how do you approach maximizing the amount of interactive light?
So one of the things that we do is we work very closely with the lighting team, right? So we can actually connect our media servers to the lighting console and generate light cards that basically act as their own lights. So the lighting designer can take these light cards and strategically place them all around the volume, and you can make them undulate, you can make them change colors, you can add gobos and create all kinds of really neat interactive sequences just with the touch of a button, and they can control it in the way that they're used to. And rather than having to lift up a scissor lift and hang a light or something like this, you give this little tool set to the lighting designers where they can just kind of like move things around very, very quickly. Obviously, it's limited. Like, you can't really create a lens flare or anything fancy using one of these. So we still rely on the lighting team to create some of the really fancy effects, particularly with lens flares and some of the key lighting and everything. But just to kind of cut corners and shave some of that time off, what would be considered more of like the annoying steps, we could just make that happen very, very quickly by throwing up these light cards. And that's one of the things I feel, even though it's a very simple tool, it's a very powerful tool, and we use it all the time.
So how did you get started in virtual production?
So I've been working with video tech for the better half of 15 years, but I just got started around 2020 in the virtual production world. So, about 5 years now. My background, I kind of came from a musician's background. I went to school for audio and music production. And then I kind of over time shifted into video. And I've been in music since I was a kid. I started working professionally when I was about 18 years old. 2006 was kind of when I got going. And then I transitioned into more video technology around 2010. So I got a job randomly when I was living in Austin, Texas, to go on a festival circuit. So that's when I got first introduced to LED walls and projection mapping and camera systems and these types of things. And so it kind of balanced out my work-life balance. My hobbies is music. And so it kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of work between the two and, have the bandwidth to do my art. Working with video technology all day is really, really cool in that way. And then so those opportunities led to more gigs, kind of led to concert touring, working with AAA artists. And then when COVID hit and everything kind of shut down, I was able to take all those skills from concert touring and kind of transition them right over into the virtual production ecosystem, because it's all the same type of technology, just applied in a different way.
What are like the differences and also the similarities between working on live events and concerts and big events like that and working at a solo stage for virtual production?
So I think the main distinction between the two is, when you're on a concert, you are go, go, go. You got 30 trucks. You got to dump these trucks, get that stuff set up, and you got to show that night. There is no waiting around. There's 15,000 people in that arena. You got to go. So you kind of just got to go with what you got and do your best and make it work. Where in the virtual production environment, your goal is to make everything look as photorealistic as possible in that camera. So it's just a totally different mindset going into that world, because you're focusing not just on making it work, but making it look absolutely perfect, because the goal is to try to eliminate as much post-production as possible and cut the amount of VFX shots out, for you guys as possible in post. So that's probably the main difference. I mean, it's the same technology, but just a totally different headspace that you're working in.
What would you say is your main role today or just throughout those productions?
Yeah, so it varies on the need. I'm a virtual production supervisor as well as an engine operator, programmer, and I'm a technical project manager. So I'm kind of bouncing around depending on where we need to fill that hole. I'm a full-time guy, working for NEP Sweetwater / Lux Stages, wearing lots of hats, but primarily a technical project manager. You need somebody to kind of front end all of this work and build everything out, design everything, and then it's a lot easier to source out operators and things like that than it is technical project managers. So that's probably my main role right now. Yeah.
Awesome. What kind of environments would you say work best in virtual production?
If you can lean into the sci-fi, creating something that doesn't exist in the real world. The Mandalorian was a perfect example of these really high fidelity sci-fi type looks. Anything that it's hard and challenging to get there on the day. So for example, golden hour, if you're trying to shoot a really fancy sunset and you go out into the real world with your crew and you try to wait for that 15-minute window to get that perfect sunset with that lens flare, you're locked in and you get what you get. Whereas we can shoot a golden hour for 16 hours especially if you shoot real principal photography. If you go out and you shoot an array and you stitch them all together into a lat long and throw it up, and you're suddenly immersed in principal photography, that maybe you went out and shot some of your other shots from your film, and you can make that a continuation in the LED volume to deal with some of the really finite details. Those are probably the best use cases, like turning an uncontrollable environment into a controlled environment.
Yeah, even for the flying scenes, obviously, being able to know that it's going to be, 3 p.m. all day versus having that sun changing and adapting and having this external factor that you can't really control at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
During like a pre-light, what are the sorts of creative questions or just problem solving you try to do beforehand so that you can have a successful shoot?
A lot of it lies more on the technical end, because we have an advanced color pipeline that we have to accommodate for. When you go out and shoot principal photography, that lighting is going to interact with the sensor of that camera in that very specific way. And then when you take that content and spit it out of an LED wall, that's going to process that camera footage in a specific way, which is then going to be shot by another camera with potentially a different sensor in its own way. So you get gamma curves that are stacking on top of each other. So we developed this really unique and high-tech color pipeline where we calibrate the LED wall to the sensor of that specific camera, so that actually balances out those curves and makes everything linear. Mm-hmm. Having that conversation and working with the DIT, working with the director of photography to make sure we have time with the camera team to come in and calibrate these sensors, and not only that, but sync the cameras to the LED wall. Because the cameras are going to be shuttering at 24 FPS and the LED wall is going to be spitting out content at 24 FPS. And without sending a signal to all of these elements, they're going to be out of phase with each other. So we have to go through the process of either dialing forward or dialing back this signal to get those to be locked together at the right timing. And so that's a process that we need to go into and make sure that the team understands, hey, we need to time with your team and your cameras to go through that. Additionally, getting the camera tracking system calibrated with their lenses and their cameras, because every camera has a different mounting system. You mount the tracker in a different position. And if you don't go through the process of calibrating that camera and that lens to that tracker every time, the origin won't be perfect. And then as you translate through the environment, you'll start to get kind of a drift where it'll exacerbate. And so you kind of have to go through that process. And a lot of it's on the technical end. And then when it comes to the Unreal and the real-time stuff, just making sure that, kind of like I mentioned before, understanding what the goal is so that we can consult with their virtual art department and tell them, hey, these are the kind of tools that we think you should build for this goal, because everybody has a different need. For example, in the Megalopolis, they really wanted to be able to control the ultra dynamic sky, and we actually piped that in, and we were able to control that through a lighting desk and mapping some of these settings to MIDI and different tools. So just making sure that there's like a clear direction, and that direction is understood, and that there's enough time given to work through and suss out some of these things, particularly with the real-time stuff, because it's not like just playing a video on the wall. Like, you're actually rendering a game engine in real time on the wall. There's a bit of a lift in pre-production. Yeah, definitely more technical type conversations.
And it sounds like a lot of communication from every department just to make sure that what they want actually gets there on set once everything's coming together.
Yeah, definitely, especially with set builds, making sure that we have enough time to interact with the set designers. So, for example, if you have a railroad track that's built in the volume and then that exceeds into the virtual world as an extension, we need to go through the process of calibrating that element to the wall and making sure that that track doesn't drift off of itself as we're translating through the space. And that's a whole alignment process. That's one of the cool things about working with the LED in the volume, is that we get to interact with all these different departments. I feel like on our end, particularly, the pipeline is very well understood, and we've been doing it together for a long time. So we get the opportunity to kind of bring people up to speed and get them feeling warm and cozy inside, and feeling like they're in good hands. So So like you said, yeah, a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth.
And I'm guessing on a lot of these, one of the biggest issues is going to be camera tracking, because if you have more pieces of set, that's more opportunities to occlude the camera trackers.
Yeah.
What is it like to communicate with people on set during the day, and also just passing on that information to make sure the sets are built in a way that that take that into consideration?
We have a lot of documentation, where we kind of send out the do's and don'ts, things to look out for, reflectiveness, or like you mentioned, occluding. We kind of build in some damage control around that. So we kind of anticipate that there's going to be occlusion. So we design the camera tracking array to where every angle is going to have coverage from some degree. And then we even have some backup camera tracking cameras. So if we need to, we could add in some tracking cameras to get the coverage we need, depending on how much occlusion there is.
Maybe could you just walk us through a typical shoot day as an operator, from the morning all the way to leaving for the day?
Sitting in that operator role is a really high pace seat to sit in. You've got a lot of people coming at you from all directions, a lot of requests. So I think the key is just maintaining the ladder and making sure that the people above you are communicating. Mm-hmm. You're kind of creating a chain of command, because it's really easy to have 15, 25, 100 people hovering over you, yelling at you, like telling you to do something. And so establishing that chain of command is crucial, because you have a lot of pressure, you have a lot on your shoulders as the operator. So that's really where the virtual production supervisor comes into play, is just making sure that they're acting as a shield for you, against the production, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's really easy to spread yourself too thin. So there's a lot of dealing with managing the media, just making sure that you're loading up the right clips, making sure that the nomenclature is dialed, everybody understands exactly what's up at the right time. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, it's making sure that you're able to save all of these different slates in as you're shooting them, because you can't always predict what's going to happen. And in my experience, you might have a director come up to you and hold an iPad in front of your face and say, "Hey, take me back to here. I want that. Like, bring that up."
From 30 minutes ago.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, so, what slate is that? So I get into the habit of kind of saving out all of these different looks into different slates, and making sure that the naming conventions are perfect, so they can just say, "Hey, bring me this." I say, "Well, what slate number?" And they say, "Oh, whatever. And I just push the button and it brings it back to where we were. So in a sense, it's kind of like you're running ahead of the train and just trying to keep track and do your best of being on top of it. And as soon as they snap that slate, you're saving these looks and being able to recall them at the snap of a finger, because it will happen.
And how much time do you usually have between takes? Because I think that's a part that a lot of people don't realize with the pace, and how that kind of dictates the speed of your own day to make the shoot day successful. Sometimes
it depends. Sometimes you get no time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's immediate. And you're making changes right at the last second. You've got a DP over your shoulder whispering in your ear, "Hey, move this, move that, get this in there." And then he's like, "Okay, stop." And then slate, you go. So you don't, as an operator, get a lot of time to really think. You kind of just have to do. And then you kind of get a break if they're going to do a big transition, like say they're going to move set pieces or going to move cameras around, change lenses, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, you get an opportunity to get up and stretch your legs a little bit. But it's a pretty high pace environment. It is nonstop. Go, go, go. Yeah.
I know a lot of people that watch this channel, they're trying to break into virtual production and find their way into the industry. So what advice would you give to someone starting out who's trying to work on set in virtual production today?
The mentor in me just always wants to say, do your best, because these environments are not easy to exist in, especially for someone who's just starting out. So my advice would be to just be a sponge and try to absorb as much knowledge as you can as you move through the space, and try to understand how all the little pieces interconnect, from the camera tracking to the LED walls, the cameras themselves, all, Unreal Engine, because it's a lot more than just Unreal Engine. There's a lot to go into the virtual production workflow, and just going in with a humble heart and know that you're gonna get eaten alive, and just do your best, because it's not easy, especially the first time. And just knowing that you're not alone. Like, we all go through it, and it's probably going to be the hardest thing that you're ever going to do, because as someone who's been doing concert touring and big productions for 20 years, this is by far the hardest thing I've ever done. So just know that going into it, it's not going to be easy, and expect challenges,
Mm-hmm. What makes someone stand out if they're either applying or trying to get that very first gig?
If you want to stand out, it depends on how you want to stand out. If you want to stand out in a good way, I would say just try to keep your cool. Be as mellow as you can, because it's a high stress environment, and that energy has an influence. So if you can keep your cool and just go through the process, it's kind of like being in the ocean and getting caught into a wave.
Yeah.
If you start to struggle and you start to flail, you're going to run out of breath fast. So you just got to keep your cool, take a deep breath, and just do your best through the process. That'll make you stand out. The people, if you can maintain that integrity, stay humble, and if you can muster it, be kind, that will make you stand out, because people will see, okay, this person is reliable. And also just being honest. Maintaining a client's expectations is a skill, and it's not something that I wouldn't suggest faking it until you make it in an environment like this, because there's a lot of money at risk. And just be honest. If you don't know how to do something, just say, hold on, wait a minute, guys, hold the phone. I don't know how to do this. Let's figure this out. That involves going through your chain of command, talking to your supervisors. Just make sure that communication is clear, because you're going to save a lot of time and money, and then you're going to win the respect and the trust of your superiors.
In terms of building a portfolio to get on one of these teams, is there anything or any skills or software that your team is specifically looking at as kind of a baseline for folks to learn?
Ultimately, what I would say is everybody in this environment is coming from a different skill set, whether it's Unreal Engine, whether it's concert touring, or like CG graphics, whether you're using Notch or Touch Designer or any of these other softwares, Premiere. I think just putting your best foot forward is your best chance, because you've only got what you've got. So if any projects that you have worked on, just go ahead and get the best of what you got and put it together. And if you can cut yourself a portfolio, that's your best way to move forward in the industry. And everybody starts from a different place, right? So even if you're just starting off as a graphics artist for a band or something, put a video together, show people what you got, and then just put that best foot forward. And then when you put that energy out there, it will multiply and it will attract. So just, keep going and do your best.
Nice. And what would you say the biggest misconception is for people trying to break into virtual production?
Yeah, I would say that people think that this is just a big green screen, a fancy green screen. No, it is not a fancy green screen. There is way more to it than that. I mean, you've got real-time engines, you've got node systems where you're multi-rendering different instances of Unreal Engine to a wall. You're dealing with camera tracking systems. There's so much that goes into it. It's not as simple as a green screen. And I think that's something that people tend to just think when they come into it, and they don't really understand all the interconnectivity and all of the technology that goes into making this successful. It's just a completely different workflow. And I think the other thing is you might get people who come in and think that, just knowing Unreal Engine is all you need to know to be able to do this. And it's not. There's so much more to it than just being a talented Unreal Engine artist. Like, you have to understand this technology. You have to understand traditional VFX workflows. You have to understand cinematography. You have to understand cameras, LED walls. I mean, there's so much that goes into that, because there's a learning curve to applying those skills into virtual production.
And at the pace of being able to summon that knowledge at a moment's notice and make something that looks incredible.
Exactly, especially when it comes to tool building. Like, if you run into a situation where you need to build some kind of fancy blueprint to accommodate some request from production, I mean, you've got to be able to keep your cool and you got to be able to, use your knowledge and lean on your team, because it's the more that know, the better, and just be willing to work with others and not just take everything on yourself, because that's one of the things I've seen people do a lot is in high pressure environments, they just take something on themselves. They get really stressed out, and just know that you're working with a team and you have other people that are willing to help and willing to take their feedback and work together to accomplish the goal. And it's not, there's no, well, I shouldn't say I know a couple, but there's very rarely one person that knows how to do everything.
And when there's 5 or 6 client requests all coming in at the same time, like one person cannot do everything all at once. So
precisely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, cool, man. That's all I had, but I just want to say thank you so much for lending your expertise and sharing your knowledge on the show and to give all these, everyone that's watching a great background on virtual production. And just want to say thanks.
Yeah, Van, Josh, thanks for having me on. This is really awesome. I appreciate the opportunity, man. And it's fun to interact with other professionals and talk about this stuff and kind of, get into the nitty gritty. I really appreciate it. And it's a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.